Okay, so we're spiritual beings and everything is really spiritual for us, but we don't know it. So we're spiritual beings in a physical body that also has, or should have, or used to have, spiritual connection for us to where we are at a high potential while we are in this false video game reality game that we play reluctantly, most of us. Now, and our thinking plus feeling does create in this false reality video game earth matrix. And in our natural state, without technological interference, we are naturally connected to those of our own kind, which is a real human being. These are just titles. These are just names. You could say, well, what is a real human being and what isn't a real human being? What is the difference? And okay, so now I've gone off track, you see, that's interference. And it doesn't take much for me to go off track. In fact, I was just going to say that this is my third attempt because I get sick of the way I talk and the way I muddle it up and whatever, but it's the best I can do under the circumstances. And yes, I did actually download a video that was only 3 seconds long a day or two ago, which I didn't realise until I looked. But that was because I got so convoluted being in this matrix world, and I'm blaming it on the matrix, of course, but of course if I had concentrated more, which I'm finding very hard to do because I am in a matrix that is full on at the present time, yes, I deleted the 2-hour video and put out 3 seconds that was accidentally pressed at the end of the video. So that's the matrix in a way. So now I have to try to remember what I said in the other video. But either way, just thought I'd add that a lot of the things we're doing now, we can't concentrate. Even your physical body can be taken over to where the emotion gets strong, the anger takes place, or the lack of concentration, and you do something unconsciously. I don't think that it is very good to do things unconsciously in a matrix. In a natural, normal world, it probably wouldn't matter that much, I would imagine. But in a matrix, where you're operating against, negative energy, and you're meant to be positive, but you're in a negative domain, you're in this, this matrix situation, which I have tried to describe the best way I can, but it's very hard to do that. But either way, I'm going to say that it come to me yesterday, I think, that there's a saying called the eye of the storm. Well, the storm, and I'm putting this arty, which I do like to do if I can occasionally get that mind going that way, but the eye of the storm is a saying. It means the center of the storm, I think. Okay? So we are human beings. If you are a real human being, then you are the eye of the storm. The storm is the matrix Earth. It is a storm. It is blowing winds every which way. It goes all over the place. It is chaos because it's a big matrix. And it has many minds that put their input into it. And most of the minds that are putting their input into the matrix are like mine. They're so confused by the matrix. They're getting a lot of negative energy. So therefore, they put negative energy into the matrix. So it's like this is what I think we are meant to do. This is my conclusion, and I think many would agree with this and probably already know it, but it's a nice way of putting it. We're the eye of the storm, and the storm is raging, a hurricane around us, tornadoes, wind, rain, blowing, gale force winds, all over the place. That's putting it in an arty, fancy way. And we are the eye of the storm, so we're right in the centre of it, in the thick of it. Human beings are the eye of the storm, the centre of the storm. They contribute to this storm, mostly unknowingly and indirectly, but they are the eye of the storm. But this other saying that we've all heard, the calm at the centre of the storm, that is what I'm supposed to be. That is not what I am, as you can see. I can't even make a video without getting upset. I'm trying to be calm today. So we're meant to be the calm at the centre of the storm because we are the eye of the storm, which is the centre of the storm, but we're meant to be the calm at the centre of the storm because then the Earth matrix is calm. Because we have input into it, and that is why the negative matrix tries to make sure that we are not calm all the time, because then the matrix would be at a different frequency. And that frequency is only going to be conducive to a limited number of human beings. That's the frequency I want, but not one I'm capable of, because, yes, you're the calm at the centre of the storm, meant to be the calm at the centre of the storm, but instead you are the eye of the storm, the centre of the storm. You're meant to be the calm at the centre of the storm, but instead, like myself, I do not feel calm at all. I was about to feel calm when the matrix exploded. And so now we have, yes, a matrix explosion. Now, there's a song called Eye of the Tiger. I'm feeling very arty today, as you can see. Eye of the Tiger is a song. We are the eye of the storm, the centre of the storm. The Eye of the Tiger song, that is what we are now. That is the matrix. You see, am I losing myself and losing you as well? Because I probably am. But you see what I'm saying is, the Eye of the Tiger song is, you're the eye of the tiger. You are fighting for your survival, fighting just to keep alive. That is not the calm at the centre of the storm. That is the I tiger at the centre of the storm, which is what I am now. This is not what we're meant to be. We're not meant to be the eye of the tiger, even though the Matrix is the eye of the tiger. The Matrix likes the eye of the tiger. The Matrix operates being an eye of the tiger, looking down and only wanting to dominate, control, fight, and infiltrating your mind to where you become the eye of the tiger, and you think that is normal. You don't think that, you're the center of the matrix. You're the eye of the storm, the center of the storm. And instead of being the calm to calm that storm down, the matrix wants you to be the eye of the tiger, where you are fighting and making the storm blow more, making the tornadoes, making the hurricanes, making all the elements, all nature fighting to survive. I am the eye of the tiger in this earth matrix. I am the eye of the tiger of the storm. I'm the center of the storm, but not the calm at the center of the storm. No, I'm the eye of the tiger fighting at the center of the storm, making everything worse. That is how it kind of operates, putting it in a very arty way for the first time, which I kind of like. I think it was arty anyway. But either way, if you get what I'm trying to say, and I think these sayings are given to us by the Matrix, I just take it that everything is given to us, by the Matrix. We're meant to sort of interpret it and use it. And I think, you might say, well, if the Matrix is negative and it doesn't want the calm and doesn't want the positivity, because the human's meant to put positive energy up against the negative matrix. The matrix is all negative. That sounds, it's negative in the sense that because it is, it fights itself and uses the duality. It's dual. See, I get to where when I'm making these videos that, I don't want to make them because I know that everything I say, if I'm saying it to the wrong person, it will be taken maybe in a misconstrued way, because as I've said before, there are many ways you can take everything. You can even take truth and it can be in the matrix. Everything can be used in many different ways because it is a matrix that knows how you think and wants you to go a certain way. Human beings are meant to have free will, and they do, but it is not a free will matrix. It really is not. Your free will can't really be taken from you because you're a human being, and although you're in a no-will matrix, if you like, your free will still can't be taken from you. But they can make the matrix, it will be very difficult if you exercise that, because, if you want to think that you're in a free will matrix when you're really in a no-will matrix, then the matrix will operate against that, because that is in opposition to what a matrix is. A matrix is not about being in a natural world with natural beings that just create reality with their thinking, and they are the sole source of the matrix. They are the sole operator of their matrix or their earth. Not putting this very well, as usual. I'm getting disgusted again. But see, there are just too many realities in this reality, if you want to look at it that way. It is too convoluted. Even if you understand it, and I certainly don't fully understand it, but even if you do think that you've got it mapped out, you still have to deal with it. And as a simple human being, you're not meant to be dealing, I don't think, with all these realities. Or maybe we are, I don't know. Seems to me that I don't feel that I should be. I feel that it is something. I do feel that it is something that is, and that because of making so many wrong choices in a negative life, yes, you do come to that position. I do think there is truth to that, because that has to be the case. Because unfortunately, like, even when I think about myself, and I'm shouting here, which I shouldn't have to do, see, that is not the calm at the centre of the storm. Even if you're making a video and you're trying to explain things, if you're shouting because you can't hear things and all, it's a negative vibration. It's not, it's like I think I said it in the other video, it's like a guru talking about meditating and eternal peace and you do this and that. If that person doesn't represent what they're talking about in a relaxed, calm, peaceful manner, it, unless you understand that the matrix is different for each person, you're not really going to get many people to even realise or to think that it is true that they are the centre of the matrix, and that they're very, their simple act of arguing. Like if I think about myself even, I would say that when I became aware that I was in the matrix, and I became quite frightened of being in a matrix, and I wanted to get out of this earth that I really was starting to like at that point, you see. But you're not meant to really like this matrix, because if you like it too much, that is a good vibration. And then, now you see, that's a strange thing, because it sounds contradictory and it sounds stupid to say that, I understand that, but you would be meant to like the matrix if it was a natural earth, and you would just naturally like it, etc. But that isn't the case, because it's not our matrix, it's not our earth. We are the centre of it. But it's like being a fish, as I've said, out of water and being put in a bucket and saying, now will you keep the matrix going? You're in a bucket, you've got water, you're alive, but you can't swim anywhere or do anything. You're just going to operate the matrix by your thought, because you are a living thing, and this matrix needs your life force. But it doesn't need you to be a life force. It just needs your thinking life force. It only wants to take the best from you, but not let you be the best in the matrix, if that makes any sense. So it wants the fish to think that it's swimming in some water, but not be a happy fish swimming through all the oceans and going anywhere and everywhere it wants. No, it's like you have to be like the eye of the tiger. You have to be satisfied with just life at a survival level. And hopefully you will even enjoy fighting to survive. Because in that Eye of the Tiger song it says the thrill of the fight. It is encouraging you to be the eye of the tiger, encouraging you to want to fight in the matrix, enjoy fighting for your survival, if that is possible. I do not think that is possible for a real human being, but it is possible if you become less of a human being, if you become taken over by negative matrix, negative spirits of the matrix, if you like, because the matrix is also a bit like a spirit. Human beings are spiritual and spirits, and they're meant to be connected to a natural spirit, earth, and natural animals, and natural birds, and natural air, and natural, that is their natural domain. And I don't know this to be true, because these are my fairy tales, right? They are my fairy tales. They are my fables. And, I can make them up and say what I want. And I do. But, they come to me from sources, and the rest I elaborate myself. I take sources, and then I make up my own story. Now, just lost myself there, you see, because I didn't keep on track, lost the concentration. Because I feel obliged to always emphasise that, because I'm in a matrix, you can't say things are facts when it may not be someone else's fact. I think it's all fairy tales. And I think some fairy tales are facts. Or they certainly have a lot of facts in them, or a lot of good ideas in them, or a lot of are expressing the matrix. That's how I take it. I take it that way. And for me, it is, it's valid. But I still say that's still up to each person. Your reality is how you see things. Now, where was I on track here? Where did I go off the track? Oh, okay. Well, like the fairy tale, I don't know if I put this in the video before, so I could be repeating myself, but we have this. I always go back to the Snow White fable because it sums up this Earth matrix for me a lot more simply and clearly. But even Snow White, as you know, in the fairy tale, the queen of the land, when she realised that the mirror told her that, yes, she was no longer the fairest in the land, and that's why she went to the mirror. She needed that admiration continually. And she needed some truth too. She needed that. She needed to know for sure. She needed to know for sure that that her status was not going to be taken from her. But either way, when Snow White took the apple, the poisoned apple, from the queen, who was disguised, quite disguised, but also showing her true character, really, when she come to Snow White with the poisoned apple to sell Snow White a poisoned apple, she come to Snow White in the guise of an old woman. But if you look at the fairy tale and the pictures and things, she really looked like a wicked old hag witch almost. She was not very attractive. She was, but Snow White still saw her as an innocent old woman and bought the poisoned apple and ate it. So Snow White is like us as humans, because Snow White was a real spiritual human being, which was why she was the fairest in the land. The queen was the power of the land and was beautiful, but she was not the fairest in the land. Although these days, as I've said before, our way of looking at things now shows that we are in a negative matrix, in the sense that right this very moment, if I was reading Snow White now and I was, say, 8 years old, like when I did read it, I would probably admire the wicked queen more than Snow White. I would probably say, well, no, that queen is more fascinating. That queen looks stronger. She looks more impressive. She's more fascinating. Snow White looks like an innocent, silly dope. And after all, she took the poisoned apple in her innocence and spiritual goodness from what was clearly not a person that she should have really trusted. But she did not face the reality that she was living in a negative matrix. She thought she was living in a natural spiritual earth. That's why she took, in other words, she was not silly, but her innocence in assuming that she was not in a negative matrix, which she was, because she was surrounded by a lot of negativity. Sure, there was positive there too, like the seven dwarfs, but she was not aware that the queen was out to eliminate her. She was not aware that the queen, in her power, could get anyone else to kill her too, which is what she did do, but she failed at that. That's why she decided to do it personally herself, as the fairy tale goes, as I remember. But because she probably decided to do it personally after the huntsman couldn't kill Snow White, as the fairy tale goes. As you know, he was hired by the queen to take Snow White into the forest and kill her. But when he saw that Snow White was a spiritual, real human being, even the callous huntsman could not actually kill her. He reneged on the job, you could say, which really does not happen in a matrix, because most of the people in the matrix now are total psychopaths in their personality. So they don't feel for anything, they don't care for spiritual human beings whatsoever. Whereas back in that time, he was an assassin or killer in his trade. But even he was still partly human, because he thought that if there was a valid reason to kill something, he would probably do it. He would kill an animal probably, or whatever. But he found it, something in him could not let him kill Snow White. And he was probably wise not to do so too, because it probably would have caused him problems down the track. The Queen, of course, is not worried about that, because she's like the Matrix. She's in a different position. She's not interested. She's her own spirit now. She's her own God. She's not worried about what's going to happen in 100 years' time or any distant future time. She's about power now, about glory now, about dominance now. She's the fairest of the land. That's enough for her. I haven't made any sense here, and I'm terribly sorry that was not very good. But I'm saying that Snow White still, if she had been aware that she'd been in a matrix, she would not have took that poisoned apple. It wasn't that she was foolish, it's just that she was unaware. There's a difference. Because she didn't realise that the world had changed. She didn't realise that that people had changed, that the Queen had changed. Maybe the Queen was less anti-life at some point. I don't know. I can't speak on that. It's speculation. It's a fairy tale, and I shouldn't have went on to it really. But essentially, as I've said before, this can't really be stressed enough. But also, I was just going to say that also with that business of Snow White taking the poisoned apple from the old lady, thinking that it was innocent, it's also goes back to our beginning of time fable of where Eve takes the apple from the tree in the garden that is also poisoned. and from, the same being inhabits the bodies. The queen was of the same nature as the being that gave Eve the poisoned apple in the Garden of Eden. That apple didn't kill her directly like poison, the same as in Snow White, but it was a poisoned apple. It was an apple that was not a benefit to Eve. It was one she was not supposed to eat. And that doesn't even fit my fairy tale that I was doing, which I will try to finish and get and elaborate more on it, make it into something else. But it's still like, I'm just talking very basic, silly principles, and I know that I'm losing myself and you when I do this, because it is going from one thing to another, and it's not, I'm interrelating stories just by a simple thing like an apple, saying in all those examples you have a real innocent human being. I say innocent only in the sense that if you don't know something is negative, you have no reason to not take of it. If you think an apple is positive, like they say an apple a day keeps the doctor away, an apple is good for you, you're not going to think that it's poison, because you're not suspecting that you're in a negative matrix, that that everything is really poison, not really a benefit. What appears to be a benefit will often be a poison. A bit like another movie where, you see husbands trying to poison their wives, or vice versa too, in order to get their money, and they think they'll get away with it because the spouse does not suspect that their loving husband or their so-called loving husband or loving wife actually wants them gone, because they have a different use for them. They don't see them as a spiritual human being. They might just see them as a source of money, a source of wealth, a source of some sort of convenience in some way, some use. But it is not about loving them or loving their so-called spirit, no. It is only that they serve a use. And that's how the matrix is with humans. There's no liking of the spirit. There's no liking of the human. There's actually the reverse. It's a reverse world, but there's a use for them, because if you are the center of the storm, center of the matrix Earth, that can't be helped. Now, but it is used by the matrix to keep the matrix storm going. The matrix likes a storm, likes a good storm, doesn't like calm weather, shall we say. Because calm weather creates a different vibration, which creates a different reality. And that reality is not the reality or the vibration of the matrix God entity and its minions and disciples. It's not their matrix then. It's not a matrix. Now, that probably doesn't make any sense, and I probably am not making sense. Did I say in the last video, am I going to be repeating myself? And I thought it was so fancy when I thought it up, but I don't know if I put it very well. But, we're the centre of the storm, if you like, that's right. But also, like, there are many grains of sand on the beach. I'm a grain of sand on the beach. So I appear to be insignificant, so do you. If you're a human being. But there are different types of human beings. As we often talk about the psychopathic type, which is the vast majority in the reality now. Now, they are different to the human grains of sand. But we're all on the beach, and we're in the billions. On the beach, there'd be even more than billions, so it's not a good example, I know. But let's just say that it's a small beach, and we've got... The beach is like the Earth matrix. We're the grains of sand. and the water comes in, the tide comes in. Did I say this in the previous video? Because if I did, I'm not sure which one I deleted, so sorry. But we're like grains of sand, and some of us are positive grains of sand and most of us are negative. Some of us are negative because of the matrix. See, I'm meant to be a positive grain of sand, but I'm a negative grain of sand because of the matrix. Because the matrix has washed up onto me too many times and banged me on the head and made me feel angry and upset, you know, like now. But either way, presuming that we're in a reasonable natural state, presuming we are grains of sand on a natural beach with natural water coming in and the tide comes in, when the tide rushes over the grains of sand, it's affected by the vibration of the positive or negative grains of sand. Now, the positive grains of sand are in a lot smaller numbers than the negative. They're in amongst all the negative grains of sand, but they're positive. Now, when the tide comes in and passes over the positive grain of sand, it sends a ripple in the water, if you like. I probably could have used another example, which I think I actually heard in another video a long time ago, which put this actually better. Even though I do not think that that video or that person was actually quite the same as me in the matrix, but the idea was still very similar. But the matrix, as I say, is a very convoluted place. So, you know, these grains of sand that appear to be positive are not always positive. You know, positive can be negative in the matrix in reality because it's a reverse world. I could be a positive grain of sand that looks negative, or I could be a negative grain of sand that looks positive. Superficially, that is. But in reality, it really is only about vibration. So that can only be altered by a negative vibration caused by the matrix, or if you already are a negative grain of sand. But a natural, normal, positive grain of sand will always give off a positive vibration. And so when the tide comes in and washes over the positive grain of sand, it sends a positive ripple through the water. Or it should. So, my own thoughts on this, and I don't know if it's true, it's a nice fairy tale, it's a nice fable. And, you know, I've said we're spiritual beings and we are all connected. See, that connection thing is where you're connected to the water, to the earth, to the matrix. The water also, I'll use that as an example of kind of like the matrix. If I've got it wrong, I'm sorry, you might take it a bit more clear than the way I'm explaining it, because when I get too arty, sometimes it works and most of the time it doesn't. But that ripple through the water, if it's a positive ripple through the water, it can have the potential to create a tidal wave, you know, with a very strong positive force. A very strong positive vibration can create a tidal wave. The matrix only wants a tidal wave of its own making. The matrix doesn't want a tidal wave of positive frequency. The matrix only wants tidal waves, real physical tidal waves that are negative and destructive. if you want to look at it that way, and I've gone way off the track, as you can see, because and that is because the matrix that is because the earth has changed. So, like, if all the grains of sand were positive, then every time the tide come in, you would be getting a ripple that would create a tidal wave of positive, high vibration frequency, which then makes the world of that frequency, which is a different matrix to what we have now. But because the grains of sand are not all the same, they're not all real human positive high frequency vibration grains of sand. If I only knew what I was talking about here, it would be good, wouldn't it? But because most of them are either neutral or negative. Even neutral does not have any effect. Things just stay the same. And then the negative ones can probably take more effect, I would imagine, if you look at it that way. If we're talking about grains of sand, people, the world, the matrix, anything, But the positive ones are like going back to the movie and to the human and all that sort of thing. In my way of looking at it, in my fantasy way of looking at it, a positive grain of sand outweighs many negative grains of sand. Their vibration is so much stronger that it can neutralize many, many, many grains of negative sand and can turn the neutral ones into positive, if you want to look at it that way. That really wasn't a very good example. I'm not sure where the tidal wave and the water come into it. I was trying to be too fancy there. But that is essentially probably how the matrix and the matrix God entity looks at human beings, because it knows that it is the center of things. So there is always that remote possibility that in small numbers even, if the frequency does rise, that there is a potential for a tidal wave to wash over this technologically encased world. It's flooded with technology now. The water even is flooded with technology. But if it can hit some positive energy, some positive real human grains of sand, then there is always going to be that remote possibility that a tidal wave could sweep over this technology and wash it away. Wash away the negative technology, wash away the negative thinking, the negative not seeing the real reality. That is, in my fantasy way of looking at it, the fear of the matrix. That is the fear of the matrix. It's not a rational fear, and it's probably not going to happen because the matrix does have full dominion. But because the center of the matrix, the eye of the storm, which is really now the eye of the tiger fighting for survival, is still the controlling force, unbeknownst to it, of the matrix, because it is a free-willed human that has been put into a matrix. You can have free will, but if you say, yes, I'm going to allow negative technology into my matrix, or I'm too busy fighting the eye of the tiger being the eye of the tiger, too busy fighting the Matrix to even know that the technology is sweeping over me. That's putting it in another way, but, then I've lost track again. I'm sorry, I've lost my thought. But most people now are very. I have to say that like I've said this before. It really is a fight in a way for a lot of things in the Matrix. Now, I'm going to use another example. Of little things in my life, but they're very hard to do these things because they're personal, and I don't think I give them merit. But a few years ago, I picked up a little cat off the street. It was only a little cat. It was called Squirt because it was little, and no one could think of a name. And I didn't want to give it a name because I didn't want to become attached to it, because I didn't want to keep it, because I was already setting up negative vibration. I was fearful for the cat. I thought the cat was doomed if it lived with me, that it would not survive very long. And it didn't. It was there for 3 months. Because I was fearful that I couldn't... my fear created the negativity. Now, whether the cat would still be alive if I had less fear, I thought that it was all about choices, because when I picked up the cat, and I didn't pick it up alone either, but because I didn't want to take the cat, I wanted to give it to a good home to someone else, because I didn't feel that even at that time that I could deal well with a cat, an animal, even though I really like cats. In fact, I am a cat person almost, but that's not relevant. But but the cat, but because the cat was left on a main road, it was abandoned, I couldn't leave it there because I knew it would get killed if it stayed there probably. But when I brought it back, I had intentions of giving it to someone else if I could, but the Matrix created so many obstacles for me that in the end I ended up keeping the cat here, with the dog, the same dog that I got possessed with, and that it gets possessed, etc., etc. And so it was a difficult situation because the dog didn't like cats at that time. But either way, I'm rambling on. But the point is that I'll forget that story, but this little cat, during that 3 months at one time, and I was not aware of this, I did not see it, someone else saw it. When it was here, it was crying all the time. It was howling. In fact, it was so loud I thought that maybe neighbours would complain because it was continual howling, screaming. And at the time, we did not understand what it was. I didn't understand. It was, of course, the reality was that it was a normal female cat looking for a mate. It was fighting for survival of its species, I now see. I didn't see it like that back then. It was only a few years ago. It was howling and crying. Let me out. I must find a mate. I must make more of my kind. My species will die if I don't. That was the cat. The din and the noise was unbearable. Eventually it sneaked out, or let out for a little bit, because it was a semi-indoor outdoor cat at that time anyway, even though I tried to keep it an indoor. But either way, that's not the point. It got out, and within a day, even though most animals, 9 out of 10 animals around where I am and in the city, are not capable of reproduction. They're not. They're all chipped and, you know. So, but this cat was only out for a little bit and it come back and then it was calm. And not long after, even though I did not see this, it could not hold the pregnancy and left some, what you'd call fetus kittens on the floor. Of course, they were not proper kittens at all. They were underdeveloped and just whatever. I did not see this, fortunately, and so it couldn't sustain the pregnancy because of the stress of being in my environment and the new circumstances. It was not, and of course I did not know that the cat could reproduce even. We didn't know that but now, strangely enough, at the time I thought, oh, just as well. I actually thought that because I thought, hey, well, I can't look after one cat, much less a whole bunch of kittens. I'd have to find them home and they'd probably be sick because the cat was quite undernourished when I picked it up anyway. It wasn't like a domestic cat that had been overly looked after at all. But either way, I don't know why I'm telling you this story, but now when I think back on that little cat, which actually subsequently kept trying to get out and did go out and eventually got killed, which is what I feared, because I was like thinking, oh, everyone was saying, let it be free, let it go outside and whatever. But that's an interesting point. I mean, this freedom versus safety and all this sort of stuff, see, I was very much at that time more into the safety with the animal, because you think of protecting animals, you don't think that they have a right to be free and to find a mate, etc. Whereas now my whole mindset, just in the space of a couple of years, has changed. Mind you, I did tend to think that animals should be free if you can have, certainly with birds and things, I had no problem thinking that they should fly and that they should not be domestic. Whereas with cats and dogs, because I've been so conditioned to it, and most people have cats and dogs, you tend to think, oh, they haven't got a bad life. It's a good thing for them to be domestic, and you feed them and they seem to like your company and all this sort of thing. But now when I think back on that little cat, how that little cat was putting more effort into its survival of its species. Now you might say, you're talking ridiculous, you're going over the top, you're making a big song out of one cat, trying to have some kittens in a big city where it may or may not matter. But I now don't look at it that way. I now look at it that little cat, because actually, when after that incident happened, when she left, couldn't take the kid, because we didn't even know at the time. I was, not totally on my own, so I had other influences, but we didn't know that the cat was a female cat of a certain age. She looked like much younger. I thought she was almost just past a kitten. So we didn't know that she'd had other litters and that she could have kittens. Because, like I say, most people do not have animals where they're just allowed to roam and multiply, shall we say. You must think I'm ridiculous the way I put these things. I'm frightened to say a few words even, so there's something a bit wrong with me that I do that. But I take these issues very seriously, even though they are just talking about a cat. I do take them seriously. I think they are part of the matrix. They are part of the big picture matrix. And every individual human and little cat is important. Not because I'm some fanatical animal liker or something. No. I'm saying that at a physical level, it is important. Because that little cat was a little spirit cat. You know, I don't often talk about animals being spirit. I know I talk about, but if you want to look at it that way, because the effort she was putting into to try to make some of her kind before it was too late. And she was stopped by the matrix, by circumstances, and then stopped by humans because it's like, oh, we didn't know that she could do this, so we will make sure that she can't do it now. So she was defeated. And her kind will not go on. There will be no more little squirt cats, and she was killed shortly after, so her species is dead. Her kind is dead. She no longer exists in this reality. That's putting it very dramatically. And she tried very hard against all odds to be the last of her kind, to keep her kind going. But it is not possible in a matrix to do that. And, oh dear, I got a bit flustered there. And at the time when the cat was with me, yes, I looked at it the other way round. Oh, I'm glad that she was not able to do that because I didn't know the matrix then. I didn't know the situation. I didn't know that species are on this matrix world fighting for their survival. Because in a funny kind of way, see, if you look at it this way, like she was so determined to find a mate to make her species survive that despite all odds, even just getting out for a short period of time in a city where, look, there are not very many stray cats around where I am. Locally, I can think of none. Every house has cats. But none of them are stray cats that are capable of reproduction. None of them. Because, you know, in the city and where I am, that would not be even acceptable. It's just not, it's not practical for a human to have animals, you know, that way, even low. Of course, I suppose you could say in a slightly different scenario, why couldn't you have the, because you could. Well, with cats you probably couldn't because they do get out and they can choose and do that. Whereas with a dog you could probably still control whether they mate with another dog, you know, unless you let them roam wild. And there's no roaming wild in a city. No animals are free in a city. You know, it's just not a practical thing because there's the roads as well. So even if you are not going to be as romantic and fairy tale orientated as me about these things and take them to some ridiculous limit. It's just not a practical thing that that as a human being, because we control the animals, I've gone off the track here again. I'm really not sure why I brought that up, to be honest. But it's what I am trying to say is that in many ways the little cat had more, in a funny kind of way, because there are not as many cats that reproduce naturally in the city. Some people might disagree with that. And there again, if you watch a lot of other stuff, you might be under what I would call the delusion. You would say, well, I've got the delusion, I've got the fairy tales, I live in the fairyland. But I would say, but I reverse that round, because I think we live in a reverse world, and this is how I see it. And also I do see it practically that way in my reality. Like I say, I don't see very many stray cats, or cats that are roaming around where they just interact with other stray cats and breed, because it's not conducive for survival, even at that level anyway. And our whole matrix world tends to operate and think that is not a desirable thing anyway. We tend to want this control over everything. We say it's a practical consideration. And look, you can't argue against these things, but what I am trying to say is that I think the matrix now has gone in the complete opposite direction. What I'm trying to say is that it's one thing to say, well, yes, it might, if you have a huge number of anything breeding, of course there is going to be a limit on the survival. And of course, yes, there's going to be dangers. There's going to be a scarcity of food. There's going to be the danger of being killed by the environment, by the traffic, by all the different things that we know can, that could hurt an animal if it's allowed to be free. So I get that. But I do think that now we've gone into, it's one thing to say that, but we've gone into, what am I saying? Am I saying that the little cat knew more about the Matrix than me or you? Is that possible? That a little, I talk about Archon spirit dolls and things, but the little cat was a real little spirit cat. But real little spirit cats don't belong in a non-spirit matrix. And subsequently, like all my stories, they all seem to have a little bit of a negative end, don't they? But that was actually what happened, and yes, I did foresee it almost. But I was aware that I was fearful and negative, because the old saying, a wise man knows its limitations. Well, I wasn't aware that I was in a matrix then. But I still feared myself. I knew my own limitations, or I thought I was very limited. I probably even thought I was even more limited than what I actually was. But even then I was aware, not that I was in a matrix, but I was aware even then that I was surrounded by an environment that was hostile. I didn't know it was a matrix, but I was aware that others around me, other people around me, were of the negative type. and that they did not like positive things. And that, yes, I felt that I did not want to bring anything into my environment that would upset the cart, shall we say, because it's like if you think that other people are negative, you might, and rightly or wrongly, I could have been really overly paranoid, but to where you think, oh, you feel a hostile vibe, so you're like, you feel that that other people are going to work against the cat even. You don't feel that you're in a comfortable environment. I felt safe on my own, but I didn't feel safe in bringing more in. Of course, I was foolish to feel that, because in reality, the human is the main source of the matrix. So mostly, animals are only used by the matrix, whether they're spirit or non-spirit. They're going to be used by the matrix only to influence the spirit of the human, if you want to look at it that way. And I was aware of that even then, even though I didn't know it was a matrix. But I was aware that there were negative forces around. But I just thought they were negative human beings that, yes, like the God of the matrix, tend to be very envious of every little thing. They don't really like the human too much, so they tend to not want the human to be successful even in little ways. Like there was no way that I was going to have a little cat and be successful at that cat living a long life and me getting on with it. There was no way that was going to work. There were always going to be environmental contributing factors to facilitate the destruction of that situation. It wasn't going to look. The Matrix does not want fairy tales with happy endings. The Matrix doesn't want high frequency human beings, because it's not a high frequency zone. It's not a high frequency matrix. Like I say, that I want a tidal wave of high frequency washing over the earth, even though it's a matrix. It still operates through the human with the frequency, even though it is not, in my view, it's not our natural domain anymore. But we still have that ability to even, under some circumstances, there's still that potential or that ability. It's not going to happen because it is a matrix, and the matrix has full power and full, has full control over the whole thing. And that's an interesting point, which, I will probably, if I can think, try to figure out why. And once again, there are probably many possible explanations as to why a natural human being would be put into, or even choose to be in, a mind and psychological and physically controlled matrix, because it's got much more that way. And for some of us, it is 100% that. For others, it may only be 50%. For some, it might be 30%. By that I mean statistics. Like all these statistics, even though they're all fantasy and we don't know if they're true or how close they are to the truth, or if they're not right at all. We don't know this. So I have to say that, even though, of course, in my own mind, such as it is, I feel sure of, not 100% clear on all statistics, but certainly know ratios to some extent. And even if it isn't totally true, there's so much. I would have to say that there's still so much neutrality. Is that the word? Like I was saying with the grains of sand, you can have positive, you can have negative, but you can also have probably neutral. I was neutral most of my life, and still, well, I'm probably negative now, but I would say that I was meant to be positive. And why wouldn't you want to be positive? Like, why wouldn't you want to be a positive grain of sand? Like you might accept being neutral, and you might accept that at times you're going to be negative, but you don't want to be. You don't want to be, because why would you? But I better stop thinking about that, because if I think about my own existence that way, it becomes so confusing, because you do sort of say, hey, the matrix is all powerful, it's all encompassing, it really is. It operates so much on fear and on conditioning and on thought implants, if you want to look at it that way, or possession. What is the difference between a negative thought, a thought implant, something that comes into your head? Because I suffer from OCD. Suffer, they say suffer, yes, suffer. Well, yes, indeed, suffer. But it's like that is where you have intrusive, apparently unwanted thoughts. I have had that since I was young. And that's what that condition is. It's simply where, and this with myself, it happens intrusively all the time. But that's why I came to the conclusion, or the acceptance of being in a negative matrix. Not because of that, because that I had accepted all my life, but it was because I was like, why does the matrix then have to be negative on someone who clearly already is got negative thought implants? When I say implants, it's an intrusive thought that comes into your head that is fear-based, always fear-based. And the fear is so great that you act on the intrusive thought. It's a bit like the possession, where you get so angry that you will act on the anger and do something destructive. It's a similar thing. Now, where this all comes from, is this all from the Archon mind parasite? And it just depends on how aware you are of it. Now, if you think it's a medical condition, you accept it. You're aware of it, but you accept it. Whereas to think that it is really something else, and not something of your own creation, because even with an OCD type thought, intrusive thought, a negative thought, that is a medical condition that you think that you yourself have created. And that's what you're told too. It's all in your own mind. You created it due to circumstances, which of course, as I've said before, there are no circumstances. They're only the matrix. Every circumstance is a product of the matrix, an invention of the matrix. Some might say an invention of your mind. Well, did I invent the matrix to make things more negative? What is the purpose of it? See, it becomes very confusing. Your thought is creating reality, but no, I tend to stay with my fairy tale, my fantasy, that the human does create your own misery, sure. But would you be creating that same misery if you weren't in a matrix? Like you create the thought with your thinking, yes, but are you creating the matrix? You're influencing the matrix. But the matrix is there too. I think. But I could be wrong. I don't know. It could be all in a human's head. But you see, once you get to that thing, like, oh, I have to leave this because, I'm not clear on my thinking in this video. So, and it becomes too convoluted. I put the little bit of stuff that I think there, and if you can make something better of it, if you can get something out of it, if it's a piece in your puzzle, or if it just collaborates a part of your picture, because they're like, we all want to think that we're getting closer to the big picture, what they call the big picture, of seeing what is a sort of bottom line of something. And because I like to keep things simple, I don't want to I don't want to make it too complicated. I don't like things being complicated. I don't think that if you're in a matrix that you're meant to have it too complicated. You can't have it too complicated in this reality. But still, that is still because that tidal wave, that awareness, is not there. And even with myself, like, it's you're aware that whatever you are now, you're only seeing such a small amount of what you're meant to see. And even when you think you're seeing it all, or you think you're seeing quite a bit, because certainly I think I see a lot more now than what I did just a few years ago. But it is all negative that you're seeing, whereas before, when you're in the dark, you weren't seeing negative because it was there, but it wasn't leaping out in front of you. Now, this, of course, is, as I've said before, that will vary from person to person. I personally believe that my reality has changed. Now, that means that those that are around me have changed, the environment has changed, the technology has changed, and it has. Now, that is because I have been brought down to a negative level of maybe. But no, I don't actually think that either. That's why I say the matrix operates even separate to a human. Whereas otherwise I would probably be like some enlightened one and say, look, I am the centre of the storm. You are the centre of the storm if you're a real human. You're the eye of the storm. You can control the storm. It is your world, it is your reality. No, I don't think that. That is not my case anyway. I'm saying that is your purpose. That is your function. That is what you are. That can't be escaped, even though, as ridiculous as it sounds, sometimes I'm like, hey, I don't want to be any part of the matrix because it is a storm. It's too negative. I don't want to be the eye of the tiger. I am not a tiger, but I can't be the calm either. So what am I? Just a victim being pushed around by the matrix at will. Yes, that's what happens to some. But I'm saying, yes, that you are literally just being pushed around by the matrix. You'd say, well, don't allow it. Well, it does become rather hard to not if it is all around. Like I say, to be in this world but not of this world, very, very, very hard to do. And then at low frequency, feeling negative, the body negative, because it is numbers too. And if you let even people, psychopathic type of people, drain you, bring the frequency down even further. Because I would say that when I became aware of the matrix, less than 3 years ago now, to the day almost, if I want to put a time on it, for the first 12 months, when I became aware of the Matrix, it was very negative for me. But I thought, I cannot stand living like this for the rest of my days. This is not what I planned. I was about to open up and accept the world and be more comfortable in it. I was aware that there were negative people around, but I was going to choose to avoid those or to deal with them differently as I had in the past. Matrix doesn't like awareness, even in a simple way. And I saw it as positive. I saw the world as positive for the first time. And for a few days it was positive, and then it went bang. We're closing this down. That's how it was for myself personally. And for that first 12 months, if I can bore you as if you're still there, I would think most have dozed off by now or whatever. But I actually thought that it was, yes, that I would not want to be in this earth anymore. I became aware it was a matrix. I became aware that it was not, that it was, that there was a collective mind working against me. A collection of minds, a collection of humans, in other words, or what appear to be people anyway, appear to be humans, but obviously if your mind goes away from, thinks a different way. I think once your mind, I don't want to go into a psychological type thing, but they weren't of the same mind as me anyway. Put it that way. This collective is not of the same mind as myself. It doesn't think in terms of an individual just being free and live and let live. It is not like that. It works for the Matrix. The Matrix is not about individuals sending out vibration and rocking the boat, shall we say. No. And it's not about a human being the calm at the centre of the storm as the video started. No. It is about the human being the eye of the tiger in the storm, in the Matrix. You must fight for your survival. You must and you must enjoy that. And there are some humans that enjoy the fighting. They enjoy the conflict, particularly if they've got the upper hand and they're of the Matrix collective, because then it's a game that they know they can win. Because the individual human is going to only be one, and they're not even going to want to fight, they just want to live. Whereas the collective doesn't want to live. They can't live. They don't know how to live. The collective doesn't know how to live on its own. It only operates as a collective. And as a collective, it doesn't appear to know how to live. It knows how to fight and to play the games and to operate for the Matrix. But it doesn't appear to want to just live as is often mocked even in a TV show. I remember where it says, "Why can't you just live?" And that is the comedy of the human. That is the Matrix putting the comedy back to the humans. Saying, why can't you just live? Well, of course you can't just live because you're in a Matrix. But we think that's funny because you should be able to, and you're the centre of the Matrix, but the joke's on you because, you won't be living. You'll be the eye of the tiger fighting to survive, playing a game that you don't choose to play in, playing a game that the odds are against you actually even surviving, yes, because, there again you have the numbers situation and your vibration will be affected if you know that you are surrounded by negative people or a negative environment. You're not just going to walk outside. You're not going to be that grain of sand on the beach just idly laying on the sand waiting for the cool water to wash over you and and then you give off a good frequency which sends a ripple through the water and everything is hunky-dory and harmonious and lovely and all pleasant and, and it's a lovely day. No, it's not going to be like that, and the Matrix isn't that world. It isn't that type of reality. Now, for some people might say, you are so negative. And I get that. And I am negative, incredibly negative. Others saw that little cat, and some with a more positive, well, I don't say it's a positive mind myself because I know the different people, but some said when the little cat died, little squirt cat died, that well, she lived more for 3 months than you. Well, yes, she did. She indeed did try to procreate, and she was like a human a real human in the sense that despite losing her kittens, despite being in a noisy, because she actually was in the laundry a lot of the time where the washing machine was going, and the noise was abominable, and she didn't care. She sat on top of the water heater until it busted because she sat there for so long to keep warm because she couldn't be in with the dog. I'm rambling on here. But then you would see her playing with little insects and things outside and making the best of a bad situation. Many humans do make the best of a bad situation. And that's what even I was trying to do before the Matrix became very negative, because and I was probably capable of doing that most of my life, but not continuously enough and not enough to affect too much, but maybe to keep things neutral, because it's still better to keep a neutral world. It can be positive or it can be negative, but neutral is kind of like where it's not real bad, but it's certainly not bliss either. It's not as humans will be at a limited level, but they will survive, and they will find little pleasures. They will be able to make the odd ripple, shall we say. Oh dear, I have not put this well with my ripples and my pieces of sand and my storms and all. I don't know, I really don't. But you see, I'm in a matrix, so what can you expect? I delete the good videos and I send I press and send a 1 second thing. This is just the matrix, and this is me. This is the matrix, and then you become a part of the matrix. The matrix can get you like that. It doesn't get everyone like that, but its desire is to. And if you decide to send a ripple, it probably will. While you don't make waves, as the saying goes, while you go with the flow, as so many people have said to me, you will be able to survive in a matrix a bit longer. But there are some unfortunate people, even though it's, some might say, well, it's not really unfortunate, but it is. It is unfortunate for your time in the matrix. But there are some people that if they are accidentally going to send a ripple, and I say accidentally because most of us don't intentionally do anything. And that's how I come to the conclusion of the matrix, because if you don't do something with full intent and you're unaware that, you think you're just a single grain of sand that has no input whatsoever onto that beach or that water or that earth. You don't think you think you're just a neutral grain of sand. And that's exactly how the matrix likes humans to think of themselves. Because the matrix wants people to think that it is the water, it is the ocean, it can be the tidal wave, and usually it is. If you follow me, it creates the waves. It doesn't want humans creating waves. It wants to create only the waves it wants. Because it's an operating, it's I can't really describe it because how would I know? It's beyond my capacity and my thinking, but it is a mind, a negative mind, controlled by a negative mind. The matrix itself is like a negative mind, but it is operated by an even more higher negative mind. A mind that has become, it has become a certain way if you're a human, because then you will see the negativity much more. Whereas, in this being's own mind, that is normal. And even if this being, the God even, acknowledge that sometimes it gets angry and is doing negative things, it's like the psychopath. It justifies its own actions anyway, as we all do, as I've done even. We all play this matrix game, one way or another. The only difference is that, maybe that, after I do something negative, now mind you, I did negative things for years, and it took me years to fully comprehend that they were negative. Sometimes you have to be hit over the head before you realise how bad your mistakes are. And you always do blame others too. You always say, well, okay, so you did something negative, but there were contributing factors. The other person may have done something negative to you too, so therefore you're justified in being negative back. And you conveniently make your own thing. And this is like the God entity does that. He, this being justifies its actions and justifies its history. But I would say that if you are dealing with the psychopathic mind, there's no validity often to the stories they tell. They're as fairy tale as mine. They're fictional. And even the parts that are true, which there's probably a lot of truth, because you have to embellish lies with a lot of truth in order to make a plausible, acceptable story for sympathy or for understanding even. But I'm still saying that, and this is valid too, but at the same time, where do you draw the line? When does the animosity and the resentment and the bitterness and the envy and the apparent rejection end? Because there again, when I go back into my Garden of Eden scenario, story, fairy tale, I haven't went on to that again, but I'm always going to go back to it because it is essentially the fairy tale of creation. And so it offers an explanation to the matrix for me, whether it's true or not. It offers an explanation. It shows me negative forces, negative beings, negative mindsets. And even I wonder where it's all come from. I wonder where it's come from in myself. And I say, hey, did I really want this to be part of my psyche, my thinking? Okay, so you could go the other extreme and say, are we meant to be happy all the time? Is it meant to be all wonderful, all bliss? Maybe not. But it's not meant to be surely miserable and negative and destructive all the time. We're not meant to be in a continual war zone. I wouldn't think. But I don't know that for sure either. Maybe I'm just as insane as the God entity and the minions and the disciples, because what if I chose to come into a war zone? I can't believe that I would have done that. It doesn't seem to fit my personality or my abilities even, for that matter, or even what I like to do. But who knows? Because you wouldn't know what you're dealing with. You wouldn't know if, because everything now has become so I go on all the movies and things. So I say, hey, if all these movies are potential realities, and if I believe all the fairy tales, I believe the movies, I believe the fables, I believe the fantasies, I believe the fiction, and I reverse it round because I think we live in a reverse world. So therefore, so many things are possible. I could be just punching air every day, and I believe I am. I believe I'm fighting phantoms, literally, even in human beings. Because what if they aren't really real? In the sense that you even get to the point you say, am I real? It's ridiculous, but it's not ridiculous because some of it is real and some of it isn't, no doubt. And if we're really in a reality that can be manipulated so much, and if we ourselves with our own thinking, see, once you get to that baseline acceptance like I do, that even as a human being, you're not what you thought you were, that you are a creator of your thinking, has a great input, even if you're not important. Even if you're like myself, you're down the lower level of society. You could, like I say, you could be a homeless person sitting on the street. You could be sitting in the gutter. But you could be you could be more important than your prime minister, than your president, than your God. Because you could be an important key, an important cog in the matrix. Because your reality is creating more of it than someone else. Because your frequency is higher, because you have more ability that way or something. I don't understand these things. But I am getting it in the sense based on my own reality and what I see, because I'm like, hey, you don't go up to the homeless man and kick him. You don't need to do that. He's already down in the gutter. But if you are doing that, that tells me that homeless man sitting in the gutter, even in his lowly state, even though he appears defeated by the world, there are other powers, other beings, the matrix sees that homeless man as still just with his thinking. This is where I come to this thing of the thinking creating the reality, because I'm like, you wouldn't need to go and kick the homeless man. He's already defeated at a superficial and a worldly level. So if you see something more powerful coming against something that is very weak and appears to be already, like almost finished, that shows that it is the thinking of that being that is the power. And that being is still thinking. So even though it can't save itself in a physical way, it can't alter its physical circumstances or its physical body or its physical pain, but its thinking, if it's powerful enough, can still send a ripple through that water that can wash over the matrix technology and its vibration, which is the opposite probably to that vibration, because you don't come up against something unless you disapprove of it, unless you see it as a threat, do you? I mean, to me, this is just a common sense kind of logical way of looking at the reality I see. You might say to me, well, look, what is she talking about? Is she really talking about a homeless man sitting in the gutter and someone comes up and kicks? Yes, I am. But no, I'm not talking about just a random, nasty, psychopathic person, although even that will be of the matrix. Because usually you have to have a reason for something. Even a psychopath only tends to attack something that it sees as more powerful or as more of a threat, or something that has something it doesn't have. Something it envies, something it either wants for itself, something it wants to take, whatever. It's a destructive mindset. It's like, hey, it's easier to destroy than to create. It's easier to destroy than to create. And maybe because my frequency is not the same as a real human or another human, I've lost that ability, or I can't, it's too hard. It's easier to destroy the positive force, you see. You know, it's like that, isn't it? It's like, you know, it's like, it's like happened once at the Olympics, you know, where there was the ice skating thing years and years ago. I think I heard something about it where, you know, they're competing for the gold medal or something, and one of the girl ice skaters knew that that one of the other ice skaters was better, and so she thought, well, look, I want that gold medal, so I think I'll just injure the other girl so she can't get it, you know. It's kind of like, it's very much like that. That's the mindset of the Matrix to a large extent, and to, you know, it's an envious matrix. It's a jealousy matrix. It's a competitive, destructive matrix, and it likes humans to operate that way too, to play the game, to be of the matrix, to be the eye of the tiger, not the calm at the centre of the storm, not the eye of the storm that is the calm at the centre of the storm, as I've repeated over and over again, because I think it's kind of okay. They want you to be the eye of the tiger, and that's what we all are. Some want to be, some like it, especially if you are in the minions and you're on the winning side, shall we say, if you're fighting for survival, you know. Because even if you just think you're fighting for survival, you know, you can be induced into doing negative things just for survival, even as opposed to just destroying other life forces, you know. And directly or indirectly, you'll be doing that if you're in the matrix anyway. Because the matrix is a technological matrix. So it doesn't actually like spirit, natural life forces. That's in opposition to it, really, if you look at it that way. The little squirt spirit cat was a genuine spirit cat. It wasn't like my Archon Lulu spirit doll. I call it a spirit doll. That was only a spirit doll because I put the spirit into the doll. I brought the doll to life. The doll was just a piece of plastic. Very much like the Matrix in some ways. It does need the human spirit. It does need that input to keep it a bit alive, because technology is very bland on its own. Technology is very dull, almost dead in its own. But, you know, if you can put life into technology via human spirit, the same as putting it into the doll, then it appears to be worthwhile. It appears to be something that is a benefit. It appears to be something that is a benefit. It appears to be something that, yes, is adding to your life, adding to your existence. But it is all the matrix. So, well, that's what I say. You know, you can be the eye of the tiger, and you can be part of the matrix. And some of us just don't seem to even have a choice anyway. You know, like, you know, I would imagine that there are some people that just can't be part of the matrix. In other words, they can only be used by the matrix, and they will be used very strongly and very fully. Their thought and their ideas and things will be definitely utilised by the matrix, but they will never be part of the matrix or rewarded by the matrix. they'll never be accepted by the matrix, and they will never be consciously the eye of the tiger, and they won't even be wanted to be, because, and I have to surmise this in my fairy tale negative horror movie movie fantasy that I appear to be in and do think is a bit of reality. It's a bad dream, or if you want to say, it's being psychotic in a negative way. But I don't believe in psychotic. I think that psychopaths, and that is the only real psychosis, because that is a negative. Of course, it's only a negative for a human, so that's why I say it's the only true psychosis or insanity, or where you're not sane and rational and so-called normal, if you want. That's if there's such a thing at all in this world. But yes, there is a normal, really. There should be, and there is. That just means where you are not like that. Now, but our psychosis, or what you class as psychotic, as far as I know, in this reality, or in the reality that I certainly came from, because reality seems to change all the time. When you see the Matrix, the whole reality changes. It's like you've gone into a nightmare. You've gone from a bad dream into a nightmare, and you have no control over it either. Whereas in the bad dream, you had some control over it. But either way, the psychosis is essentially an invention of the Matrix, because the Matrix God and its world sees everything in reverse, because it is a reverse world. I'm losing myself here a bit, as you can see, but I say it is a reverse world. But don't forget, for what I see as reverse and negative, they see as reverse and positive, because it's their world, and so their way of looking at things is different. Their way of looking at things is not normal. A psychopath is not really normal, but it's the norm now. It's the majority. So therefore it becomes normal. It becomes acceptable. It becomes even desirable. And if you are of that way of thinking, and if you are successful and productive in this world, and you benefit from this matrix, then there's no reason for you to not think that it is a desirable state. You're not going to worry that it's negative for others or for real human beings. No, because it is very beneficial to you and great for you. It's a wonderful existence for you. But I don't think that all psychopaths in this matrix do feel that way, because I think even some psychopaths, even though they have a destructive mindset, they're mainly used by the matrix against the real humans to keep them in low vibration. Because even some psychopaths, from my own observation, still are too free-minded, too free-spirited in their essence for the matrix. They may, because see, a psychopath tends to think they're like God. They control everything. They're the only important being, just as the God entity thinks that same way. So he has spawned a race of beings that are like its children, that represent this being. They represent its mindset, as I've said before. Total representation, which is to be expected in a way. But in the past, a lot of human beings did not think that way, so they kept the matrix or the earth probably a bit different to what it is now. And also numbers count too, because these are things that, a race can gradually overtake another race, if you follow me. A mindset can gradually become the norm. An idea or a belief can become the reality. a religion could take over the world, whereas you might have had a different one. Different people, if they become more dominant in the world, they will put different ideas, different. It's common sense, isn't it? You know what I'm saying? But then you have like a total takeover of almost a different species. You could say, because you'd say, well, look, a human's a human, but different humans can think vastly different to where they are like a different species. You could have, you have your your animals and things all on this earth, but you could theoretically have. I've gone off and I'm just being silly here now, but you could theoretically change the mindset of a species or an animal even. Well, yes, you can. You can control animals. You can control animals. Like a domestic dog is going to be different to a wild dog. That's because that mindset of that animal has gradually been domesticated and changed over years and years. Dog's supposed to be man's best friend, although not all of them are, looking just over there. But depends on. But what I'm trying to say is that that's a joke, but also not a joke. But it's still a living thing. Like even if something gets possessed, you don't want to be angry at it because it's not the mind of the real animal. Just as in that Exorcist movie when the girl became possessed by demonic forces, she wasn't the same little girl. She wasn't the same sweet, nice little girl, was she? She was the opposite. She was something that you couldn't even imagine. And this is, but the mother understood this. She didn't like it, but she was like, I've got to get my little girl back to being a normal little girl. But unfortunately, you might not be able to get an exorcist. Might not, and most of the time it's hard for us to exercise our own negative thoughts and possession, etc. That's right. In fact, it can become impossible. And I think that that's why I make this video now, is because it's very, like I couldn't honestly sit here and say that it's not possible to be taken over. And you wouldn't know. I mean, so I think that with even a lot of psychopaths, they're kind of taken over and they're just not aware that they're taken over. You know what I'm saying? They're actually not conscious enough to know that they're being taken over. Whereas like myself, I'm taken over. But after I've been taken over, I will become aware that I don't like it. And so therefore you fight against it and you reject it. But, there could well be others that that entertain that and don't mind it. And, like in the Exorcist movie, the little girl was entertaining the negative takeover, the possession, and it took an exorcist to get rid of that mind parasite, that negative takeover of the girl. The little girl did not exist anymore. Now, that's a pretty extreme example of it, but and it's never seemed real to me, because I always thought that movie was total fantasy. I like fantasy and fiction and fairy tales, but I thought that was not even a remote possibility. But But when you see or hear, as the case may be, as you can hear in the background, maybe, so there's two ways of looking at stuff like that, even, isn't there? Is someone possessed when they are creating negative frequency with technology, whether it be even a motorbike, for instance, and they're revving it up in a very aggressive, antagonising manner, like in the movie Jewel, where the truck driver was psychopathic, supposedly, and was using his vehicle, great big truck, as a weapon to antagonise, threaten and intimidate the innocent human being for no reason, apparently. And there was no reason because he didn't know him. But that was a negative force operating against a positive force. Now, like I say, there's two ways of looking at these things. In the past, because if you see the matrix being 100% negative, then you can't deny it. But in the past, if I heard a bike revving up, and also there were a lot less of them anyway, but if I had heard a bike revving up and a bike, even if it was aggressive, it wouldn't have bothered me, because I said, oh, well, that's someone exercising their free will, they're zooming around, it's a little bit noisy, but hey, I'd rather have someone zooming around free, than being restricted. But in reality, that is not the case, because the bike rider is of the matrix. So he's not free. He is operating in a negative manner for the matrix. And so it's a different scenario. But in the past, I would have seen that same incident in a more positive light. And you'd say, well, hey, there you go again. Thought creates reality. You're creating a negative reality by that. But this is but my point in this video is that if that was an isolated incident, I would look at it that way, because I'm not really trying to be negative. But if it's continual and it is a deliberate matrix scenario, maybe even in the past it was a matrix scenario, but because it was not as prominent, not as intrusive, and not as insidious and consistent and persistent, should I say, you could dismiss it, because humans, like Snow White, generally try to be a bit positive. Real humans tend to do that. They don't tend to want to suspect that the old lady is really the wicked witch queen that is giving her a poisoned apple. But, is it, all I'm saying is what should you do? Should you keep the innocent, positive frequency vibration going when the reality is you're in a negative matrix? For some of us, it isn't really a choice, because, like I say, if something is only a little bit, it probably is in your interest to keep living in the delusion that you're living not in a matrix and that everything, and make the best of it. I would believe that. I would go along with that, and I would do that myself if that was the case, because, but still, like I say, there is still a reality that you don't want to eat that poison apple, do you? And, you should be able to see the old woman is a wicked witch, because she didn't really camouflage it very well. Whereas I've no doubt that if we go back to the garden, I'm pretty sure that if we take that apple scenario and that fantasy fairy tale, that Eve was probably not seduced into eating an essentially poisonous apple, if you look at it that way, or doing something that didn't turn out perhaps totally to the benefit. And that's a matter of opinion too. I suppose it is. I don't see it that way, but but it's my story, so, I'll stick with the proper story. But either way, she would have probably had to have been seduced into eating something that she probably shouldn't have ate, by something a lot more, camouflaged and a lot more appeared to be beneficial than, what was essentially quite clearly not, what even a normal person would look at an old lady that looks quite haggard and quite ugly and a bit sinister looking. You might take the apple just to be polite, but you probably wouldn't feel sorry. You'd probably feel uncomfortable if your instinct was operating correct. Because humans are meant to still, I would think, be aware of things, not to be paranoid, not to be fearful. There is a difference, yes. See, at the moment, I'm like fearful. When you're fearful, that is such a negative vibration. But to be aware, to just know things without letting fear envelop you. In other words, you can be cautious but not be in a fear state. A fear state is where you are aggressive, where you're taking massive precautions. You're just not aware. You're taking the aggressive or the offensive before something even happens. Whereas to just be aware is a more, yes, calm at the centre of the storm, where you're not ignorant, you're not silly. You're just aware. But you're not innocent to the point of being on a high vibration and you're in a negative matrix and saying, oh, well, everything will be all right. I don't need to know what's around the corner. Well, you probably do need to know what's around